Hi everybody, Dana with King Street Brewing Company here in Anchorage. I hope everybody is healthy and safe given the current circumstances. I think you may have heard that the ABC board recently approved regulations that allow for restaurants, RPLs, and BDLs with a restaurant designation to fill and sell growlers to go for either curbside or a home delivery with the purchase of food. So we here at King Street wanted to provide a little tutorial to you guys that may not be as familiar with filling a growler, kind of give you some pointers, some best practices on the best ways to inspect, clean, fill growlers so that your customers who are purchasing our product or any brewery's product get the best possible experience when they get home and have a good clean pint of beer with their food purchase. First thing I wanted to cover was just inspecting growlers. Quick few seconds on that. 95% of the customers who come into our establishment come in with clean growlers. They know that if they've bought beer in the past, what they need to do to keep their growler clean. But if anybody asks, best thing to do is after the beer is poured out, almost immediately afterwards, is to rinse a growler with hot water. You can use a little bit of soap, but generally just hot water, a couple rinses, get that residual beer out of there is good enough to clean that growler. This is a clear growler, obviously, really easy to inspect. Basically, you're looking for any kind of residual beer in there, anything that's dried or sticky in there. You could probably even feel on the outside of the growler if you've got a customer who's not very cleanly. But basically what you want to do is kind of look around the edge here to make sure that there's no dry beer inside the growler. So the clear ones are easy to inspect. The amber colored growlers, which are actually more popular because they protect the beer from light penetration, are a little bit harder, obviously. You kind of want to step away a little bit, maybe look up into a light to kind of inspect this outer ring here to see if there's any dried beer in there. And obviously, if it's clear, it's good. You can also give it a little bit of a sniff test too. Occasionally, you get those customers who come in who've left a growler in their garage for the last 6 months, pop it open, and you can almost immediately tell that it's bad. Obviously, you can't fill that type of growler. You're going to need to clean that. So, best thing to do if you do need to clean a growler is get a bottle brush. We usually fill them with water, hot water, and a cleanser. It can be a dish soap. If you've got something stronger, something like an industrial type cleaner to let it soak. If you've got some really hard caked on stuff in there, that would be best. But best thing to do is go in there with this bottle brush. It will slip in there. It's kind of like a nylon with a metal handle, and just kind of work it around, get it really good, pull it back out, and then give it a lot of rinses, because if you're using any kind of soap in there, you don't want it to any residual soap to be left inside the growler. You're gonna have to give it a good couple, I would say 3 or 4 rinses to make sure all that soap comes out. Okay, I've changed the perspective a little bit to give you kind of a better view of actually how to fill the growler. I'm first going to start with just our growlers and getting something in from a customer. Given today's COVID circumstances, we've added an additional step here at King Street to kind of protect everybody, primarily ourselves, our employees, is to sanitize the bottle itself as it comes in. What we'll do is we'll actually dunk the bottle into a bucket full of sanitizer. We actually use iota 4, which is an iodine-based sanitizer. It's pretty much a sanitizer on contact, but it gives we're gonna rinse the outside of the bottle, both the bottom and the top, just so that if there's anything living on there, that we've just killed it. That's more just, again, to protect ourselves from anything that's coming in outside. Once that is done, what we're going to want to do, of course, is fill it. I wanted to show you a couple different types of fill tubes that we use or have used. We currently now use this type of fill tube, which is just basically a silicone tube attached to a barbed type fitting. You can get these fittings at Micromatic or probably Amazon online. Just look at it. We like these ones because they kind of fit our faucets a little bit better. They actually slip right into the faucet here. This is the, they go right up into the faucet and create a nice seal there. This is a little bit more of a hack, but it works fine. We used to use these for perhaps 8 years at our old facility, and basically is another piece of silicone tubing on top of, this might be a vinyl actually. Actually this is a Micromatic line, so probably silicone as well, but silicone on top. This will actually create a seal with the faucet, and then so that there's no air potential picking up into as you're filling the growler. And I'll show you how that one works. Basically, you're going to want to slide the silicone piece up over the faucet so that it seals with the faucet as much as possible. We have actually switched away from using these kinds because our faucets are not cylindrical. They're more of a kind of a V shape, and therefore they don't seal very well. And thus, we've gone to the newer ones. These would definitely be more preferable. But basically, that's it in a nutshell there. What we do first, though, however, is make sure that all of our sanding, our fill tubes are sitting in sanitizer. We basically have a bucket of sanitizer. Again, we use iota 4 in a water solution, and that allows for the tube to be constantly in sanitizer in case it picks up anything from either customer or the environment. Thing to do is actually put the fitting right directly into the faucet. Since it's the first fill of the day, I'm going to go ahead and exercise this this tap. It's Pilsner. Just to get that last inch of beer out of line. One thing about draft lines, I want to take a moment and talk about draft lines, is that really you have to have really good draft lines in order to do growler fills. If you're having any kind of issues with foaming when you're pouring a pint of beer, it's going to be amplified when you do a growler. So you really need to get your draft lines dialed in, talk to your draft tech, make sure your pressure's set, make sure your temperatures are good. If you have warm towers or anything like that, warm lines, you're going to have an impossible day filling growlers. So get that all dialed in. I always suggest basically exercising the tap for a few seconds, like 1 or 2 seconds beforehand, get any residual beer out of there. That also helps with the foaming issue as well. I'm going to go back to the growler here, and we'll go ahead and start to do a fill. But basically, we've already sanitized the outside of it. I'm going to go ahead and give it a rinse with cold water inside the growler. Just a quick rinse like that. I might do it twice just to make sure that there's no dust or anything like that left in there. But basically, what this rinsing with cold water does is it helps when the beer comes into the growler. It helps so that the CO2 doesn't get knocked out of solution. If you have a wet growler, much easier to fill, less foaming, it'll go a lot smoother. So we're going to go ahead and set that down in here, grab my fill tube from the sanitizer here, insert the fitting into the faucet, carefully put the fill tube down into the growler. Now I'll show you where I'm basically aiming for the bottom of the growler, but not all the way down. I don't want to jam that fill tube down into the bottom of the growler, or else that will cause foaming as well. So I'm just kind of wanted to keep it about an inch off the bottom and let that fill tube and the beer, as it's coming out of that fill tube, hit the wall of the growler so that there's a smooth transition. The two reasons that you don't want to have a lot of foaming, of course, is one, it's going to knock your CO2 out of solution, and if you do that too much, when the customer goes home, opens up their growler, pours himself a pint of beer, that's going to be flat. It's going to have less CO2 in there than what is desired. Secondly, slow filling with less spillage and foaming and splashing is going to allow for less oxygen pickup. That's the second thing that will spoil your beer. Is essentially as soon as oxygen gets into a beer, you're going to it's going to start the staling process. That's why growler fills using this method, because we're exposed to oxygen in the air, are generally only recommended to be drank within 2 or 3 days. But if you do fill your growler properly, I've had a growler filled and drank it a week later and it was perfectly fine as long as you fill correctly. So let's go ahead and start filling here. I got my fill tube about 1 inch from the bottom. It's next to the wall, so the beer will go into the, I'll put up here so you can see what we're doing. It will go into the wall here and start filling from the bottom, of course. Going to fill it with the world's best Pilsner, of course, King Street. And when I open this tap, I want to open it solidly and swiftly, not fast. I don't want to jank it back and forth. That can cause foaming as well. So just a quick open. Of course, the first couple drops are going to be a little bit of foam. You can see a little bit of foam on there. That's okay. But that's actually a pretty nice fill right there, because that actually will protect the beer from absorbing oxygen without causing too much foaming there. And you can see that it's filling up pretty fast. We've got a great pressure in our system. It's not coming out through too fast or too foamy. I'm going to go ahead and let this fill all the way up and actually overfill so that some of the beer pours out. And I'll tell you about why I'm going to do that in a second. I'm going to bring it down into our trough so that I don't spill beer everywhere around here. Okay, I've turned it off. I'm letting the residual beer go through into the growler. Lift it all up. I've got just a little bit of air in there, which is actually mostly CO2 foam. I'm going to grab myself a cap. I might dump the cap into the sanitizer as well to make sure that there's no contaminants on it, and then give it a good seal. Nice and tight. You don't want to have a cap come off in somebody's seat in their car. They would be very upset. And then going to give the bottle a rinse with some cold water so that it is nice and clean for the customer. Give it a wipe down. Paper towels would be best. And then that way, they've got a nice filled growler of beer for them. One thing that, if you are getting foaming during your fill, that might help to stop it is, if you're halfway through your growler and you see you're getting way too much foam, go ahead and stop the fill, push the faucet, the handle back, wait 20 seconds, let it kind of settle down, and then open the faucet then again. Be careful with non-complicated systems, like if you're trying to fill a growler off a kegerator, or most restaurants and BDLs I've found have fob systems which automatically cut the beer line supply once the keg is dry. If you do not have that type of system and you're trying to fill a growler, and like let's say you're off of a kegerator or such, and your keg blows out, you're just going to get a whole bunch of CO2 that comes up from the bottom of that fill tube all the way up, bubbling, causing a lot of foaming. At that point, if that happens to your growler fill midway through, and it's happened to me 100 times, you basically have got to pour that beer out. Mainly because what will happen is if you try to top it off with a fresh keg or something, you'll come back later on that night, open up that growler, pour it into a pint, and it'll be flat. You basically knock all that CO2 out of the beer, and it's not going to be an enjoyable experience for the customer. So hopefully I've covered all the basics there. I enjoy what we do, and I appreciate your attention. If you have any questions, go ahead and reach out to us. Also want to thank you very much for supporting King Street during this time. We haven't laid off any of our brewers yet. We're still keeping them working, making beer, and hopefully we'll all come through this together and be in a better position in the future. Thanks.